Well, good morning. Trust everyone had a good week and glad we gathered together and spend time in the Word again. Today, as we get started, would you join me and sing song number 350, Are You Washed in the Blood of the Lamb, 350.
Thank Both said low battery.
About today, which should be review for all believers. We know these things. I think if we polled our church, it'd be 100% say yes, there is a Trinity. Yes, Jesus is 100% God, 100% man. But as we rub shoulders with other people who say they are Christians, say they're believers, they might not hold to those ideas. Emery Bancroft said this. He was a theologian, wrote the book that we're drawing a lot of this material from, Elemental Theology. The history of the race, that would be us, humans, since its inception has been the history and the preparation for his coming. So all of human history in the past was looking towards the coming of Christ, and all of human history from that point on is looking back at that. In fact, I mentioned last week, even our calendars reflect that. Now we've changed the wording, the nomenclature as to what was before and what was after, but it's still focused on that one event. Page 83 in Elemental Theology. You can go check that book out. It's probably no longer in print anyway, but I have a copy. But my wife's name is on, because it was her book. I think I sold mine. Our study today, if we have time, which we're not going to, we'll cover the person of Christ. That's where we're going to drop an anchor and spend some time, because obviously if over half of believers don't even believe this or think this, we need to really understand this. So if we're talking with others, we can explain them clearly. We're not going to get to this, the eternal preexistence of the Son. That'll be another week, however far down the road we get to it. The incarnation, we're not going to get to that either. The death and resurrection of the Son, which can actually even be divided into two whole separate categories, the death and the resurrection. His current work, what's he doing now? According to the guy that spent 18 days in heaven, he's in the nursery with all the children that died. I've been learning a little bit more about this character, and who spent 18 days in heaven, and most of his book is just made up out of his head. He didn't actually spend any days in heaven, because once you get there, you're not leaving. And why would you want to leave? This is a very, very important text. And if you remember back to the very first week after Pastor Flink left, and Jeff Straub gave his first message, probably one of the most powerful messages that he gave was that I will build my church. Here's the whole passage. He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Talking to his disciples. Simon Peter said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Others were saying, "Well, he's Elijah, he's this, he's that." Kind of sounds like what many believers are saying too. He's a prophet, he's this, he's that. Peter says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah," Simon, son of Jonas. We know his dad's name was Jonah. "For flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." Peter, you believe not because you're seeing this, but because of your faith in what the Father has said. I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I'll build my church. Now, he wasn't telling Peter that he was the rock the church would be built on. He was telling Peter, you're a rock, but on this rock, talking about himself, if we could have watched, he probably was pointing at himself, I will build my church. It is a constant, ongoing process. People who are dead no longer build. My grandfather was a carpenter. He built houses. He died a while back in the early 80s. He no longer could build anything after that. But Christ says, I will build my church. It'll be continuing to go on. In other words, he is alive and he's doing this work. So in his person, he's alive. And the gates of hell shall not prevail against him. So his work, building the church, and it continues to go on. He told us that he's going to go and prepare a place for us. So there's things that he is currently doing because he's alive. Again, dead people don't build anything. They don't prepare mansions. They don't build churches. None of that. Okay. Without a living Christ, there is no church and no Christian religion. I don't even like to use the word religion. No Christian faith without a living Christ. Founders of every other religion are dead, but their followers continue to worship. So you don't need Buddha to be alive to be a Buddhist. You don't need Mary Baker Eddy and all of her nonsense to believe and to follow the idea of Christian Science. By the way, Christian Science is built on the concept of new thought that we talked about a while ago, where you can declare things to happen, and by golly, they just sort of happen. We don't need Mary Baker Eddy to be a Christian Scientist. You need Christ alive to be a Christian. Paul even said, if he's not alive, we are of all men to be pitied the most. You don't need Muhammad alive to follow Islam. In fact, he's not alive. And if you study his life, he wasn't a sterling example of morality or anything else, and he was a false prophet. But you don't need him to be alive to follow his teaching. When I was working with schools, there are a number of charter schools in the Twin Cities that are basically Islamic schools, where every student and all the girls have the head covered. It's all Islamic. Well, you don't need Muhammad alive for that to continue. If Christ is not alive, there'd be no Christian schools. They wouldn't function because it's different. The person of Christ is so different. And etc. Just fill in whatever religion you want to, and it'll work. You don't need, if you're a Mormon, you don't need, now his name eludes me, the guy got the little golden tablets that somehow magically disappeared. You don't need him to be a Mormon. You don't need Charles Russell to be a Jehovah's Witness. You don't need any of that. But again, the point is, the person of Christ is so very important. And here we've got so many people who call themselves believers who don't really believe that Jesus is who he said he was. Let's look at this idea of the person of Christ. I want to look at some false views, and then we're going to move into some true ones. Uh-oh. It came back up. Good deal. Every time I had issues like that when I was teaching classes, a student would run up and do something to the computer and work again. I don't know what they did. The Ebionites. This is an ancient heresy. Basically, they said that Jesus was just a mere human prophet. Sounds familiar to what a lot of even believers today are saying. Oh, he was a prophet. He was just a prophet, chosen by God to be the Messiah. So it's just like, I'll make Steve the Messiah, and whom I choose you. That's basically what this is saying. They rejected the notion of his divinity, believing he was not the eternal Son of God. And by the way, the term Son of God throws people for a loop. Well, see, he's a son. He was created. No, he was not. He was a son in terms of his heirship. If you read the book of Hebrews, he inherited that name because of the things he suffered, and he died, and he received this inheritance. And it's very clear there how he got that name. But the Ebionites believe that. Jesus became the Messiah at his baptism. Even though he was just a human guy, he became the Messiah, the anointed one at his baptism. And they say it's because he obeyed Jewish law. Jewish people did baptize. Because he obeyed Jewish law, he became the Messiah. I don't know what he actually did for people, but if he's not divine, he can't save. Here's one that has resurfaced again and again and again, and it's here again today. We've talked a lot about mysticism and Christian mystics who go out and get special words from God, and some of these people, God talks to them every day, all day long, and they're just making this stuff up. Basically, Gnosticism says all matter is evil. So this chair is evil, you are evil, everything that is matter is evil. So if Jesus came in a physical form, then he would have been evil. So he couldn't have come that way. So he was just basically a spirit. And there's a few different Gnostic schools, but we'll sum them up into kind of one. He was just a spirit. He was a phantom, he was a ghost. I don't know how that ties in with people touching him and falling at his feet and doing all the rest of that, but you don't have to have those pages. I heard one woke pastor say